Okay, whenever you want, Danica.
All right. Hello, everyone. If you're in the US, thank you for joining us so early. Good morning and good afternoon if you're elsewhere, or good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Danica. I'm the National Co-Director of CodePink. CodePink is partnering with the Community Alliance for Peace and Justice for a two-part webinar series on Pakistan, of which this is the second. As the current US administration moves toward renewed political engagement with Pakistan, many are seeking a clear understanding of how these shifts impact democracy and civil society, with special reference to the role of the military's crackdown on political dissent. The US cozying up to political leaders often comes with a lot of baggage and has resulted in a certain amount of fallout for people living in Pakistan, in the diaspora, and around the world, and for Pakistan's neighbors. And we hope to dissect some of the US-Pakistan relationship together and some of its implications for Pakistanis and what it might mean for the rest of the region. Now I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Malaka, before passing it over to her. I'm going to introduce her. She's the founder and director of Community Alliance for Peace and Justice, a Massachusetts-based advocacy group that influences policy and public opinion on issues concerning Pakistan and Palestine. She previously led Critical Connections, a nonprofit in Western Massachusetts that educated the public on topics such as Islamophobia, national security, civil rights and liberties, U.S. foreign policy, and intercommunal relations. And I will pass it over to her now.
Danica, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mehlaka Samdani, and I'd like to welcome you all to the second part of our two-part series examining the US-Pakistan relationship and its consequences. As Danica mentioned, in our first conversation, we focused squarely on what the Trump administration's support for Pakistan's regime has meant for Pakistan's internal dynamics. And today, we're going to widen the lens and explore the regional implications of this relationship. So, as the Trump administration has deepened its engagement with Pakistan's regime through security cooperation, counterterrorism, and economic arrangements, we are seeing ripple effects across the region. At the same time, many of the most consequential foreign policy decisions being taken in Pakistan today are being made by a regime whose legitimacy is deeply contested at home. And it is making these decisions without parliamentary debate or public input. And this raises some very urgent questions. Who is Pakistan aligning with and why? Whose interests are being served by these alignments? And what are the costs for ordinary Pakistanis, Pakistan's neighbors, and for the region more generally? So, we're going to unpack all these issues with our amazing panel. Each speaker is joining us from a different part of the world. Joining us from England, we have Dr. Aisha Siddiqa. She is an independent scholar currently working as the Charles Wallace Fellow at St. Anthony's College, Oxford. She obtained a PhD in war studies from King's College London and is the author of multiple books on Pakistan's military, including Military Inc. Inside Pakistan's Military Economy. Next, we have Dr. Moeed Pirzada, whom you will remember from last week. He is a prominent Pakistani journalist, a geostrategic analyst, TV anchor, and YouTuber, currently based in Washington, D.C. He is the founding editor of Global Village Space, which is an online news publication with a print magazine. Previously, he anchored his daily political affairs show on several Pakistani TV channels, including ARY, Geo, Dunya, and Express. Last but not least, we have Professor Junaid Ahmed. He is the director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Decolonization in Islamabad. He is currently visiting faculty at the University of Cape Town. He has been teaching law, religion, and global politics for almost 2 decades across continents. He has a JD from the College of William and Mary and a PhD from the University of Leeds. Thank you all so much for joining us. Just to let our audience know, for the next 45 to 50 minutes, I'm going to ask our speakers a series of questions, after which we will open it up to audience Q&A, and Danica is going to moderate that part of the discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to begin by turning to perhaps one of the most controversial and emotionally charged decisions Pakistan has made in recent weeks. And that is its decision to join Trump's so called Board of Peace, which, as we all know, is a colonial like entity that has no Palestinian representation. The Pakistani people, on the other hand, have always stood in solidarity with Palestinians and the Palestinian cause. And this decision, understandably, has sparked a massive backlash in Pakistan. So, my question to all three speakers is this: why do you think the Pakistani government decided to join this board? And do you believe Pakistan will send its troops to Gaza as part of this commitment? And let me ask perhaps Dr. Pirzada to begin first, followed by Aisha, and then Junaid.
Mahelka, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. Thank you. Mahelka, I think this decision, if you look at from the Pakistani military's point of view and from General Asim Muni's personal strategic view, is very important for them because over the past several months, they have been increasingly dependent upon the support from the President Donald Trump. At this moment, they see two very clear reasons for joining the peace boards. One is an increased leverage with the Western establishments, with the Middle Eastern establishments, and also there are certain financial reasons because in case the reconstruction goes forward, which is will be financed by Saudi Arabia and UAE and Qatar, there will be reconstruction contracts as well. So there is strategic leverage. It is important for them because Donald Trump is their biggest supporter. The regime itself is extremely unpopular within Pakistan. As far as my analysis goes, I do not remember any Pakistani regime so unpopular. You know, even General Ziaul Haq, which has often been referred as a very dark figure, was not that unpopular. He had some sources of popularity or some foundations of support within the social structure. This regime is extremely unpopular, and the support of President Donald Trump in the Western institutions is crucial. You know, so they see it's a very logical decision from their point of view.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mueed. Dr. Siddiqa, based on what Mueed said, I'd love to first sort of hear your perspective about the Board of Peace, but also the Pakistani government claims that, yes, by having a seat at the table, this will give us leverage about what's going on in Palestine and being able to, make decisions or being at least able to influence the decision making over there on what's happening in Gaza. Do you agree with that analysis? And then also just generally, what is your perspective on this?
All right, let me start. Thank you for the invitation. Let me start with a little correction. I am not a Charles Wallace Fellow at St. Anthony's at the moment. I am a senior fellow at the Department of War Studies, King's College London.
Okay.
Now, to begin with, I think one other caveat here, which is that, it's when I got your invitation, it was like Pakistan starting a new relationship with the United States. Pakistan, it's an extension of an old formula of relationship. Pakistan has always had a transactional relationship with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We serve your interest. We do, whatever your military goals are, and we are happy to help you. This is what the Pakistan military's objective has always been. 1960s, then 1980s, it was fighting the Soviet Union, then fighting the Taliban and other extremists after 2001. And now, very happily, they've jumped on board, very happy to join hands with Donald Trump, primarily because America has, used a new method of dealing with Pakistan. The United States no longer pays Pakistan directly, but is using multilateral organizations like the IMF, International Monetary Fund. Pakistan is heavily dependent, because of poor economy, heavily dependent on the IMF, on support from multilateral organizations. And this is the channel which United States uses. Now, primarily Pakistan's main problem, this regime's main problem is the economy. The economy is not doing well and would do anything to bring money to Pakistan. And so one of the roles that was happy to play was, to become the guardian of in the region, provide security as a service. And therefore, regional Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia or UAE or others, Bahrain, Kuwait, larger Middle East, was very happy to bring Pakistan on board. Now, I would bring two arguments here. One was that, yes, it's not illogical to join the Board of Peace. Firstly, because Pakistan didn't have options. I mean, when you're so dependent on the IMF, you can't be saying no to Donald Trump. You know what Donald Trump's reaction would be. I mean, French President Macron said France is not going to join. And initially what he announced was slapping another 20% tariff on France. He's not a man who takes kindly to a no, and especially coming from a country which was so financially dependent on support from the United States. Also, there are minerals, rare earth minerals, and other resources in Pakistan, where the Pakistani state has gone and offered to the United States without even seeking, support from the parliament, Pakistani parliament, but also from the provincial governments. So, I mean, there is a big, from Pakistan's perspective, Donald Trump is a major stakeholder as far as economy is concerned. But secondly, there was no way that they could have said no to Donald Trump. The other is, yes, it's important to be sitting in the room and listening to the conversation, listening to the argument, and also presenting their perspective. And I think where Pakistan has very logically and very gently pushed back while holding hands with other Middle Eastern countries is saying, look, we are happy to be part of the development process in Gaza, but we are not going to de-weaponize Hamas. This is an impossibility. And this is an impossibility in which Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other countries have also had the same perspective. They've had a similar perspective that, look, development and helping peace in Palestine, in Gaza, is a possibility. This is a role we can play, but not this. There will be repercussions in Pakistan. It will not be a popular decision to deploy forces. I mean, there are questions being asked, and there is unhappiness. While Pakistan is part of the Board of Peace, there are rumors. There is grapevine talking about whether Pakistan is actually going to send troops to Gaza, and in this situation, it becomes an impossibility. So, but in order to play a role, it has to sit there in the room. One very quick thing was that I think this is around September, October. There was the Military Operations Directorate in the GHQ, Pakistan Army GHQ, was asked to raise about 4,000 troops. So there was 19 Lancers, 13 Lancers, 5 horses. And the message was that this was for deployment in an Arab state. There was money to be made out of that. But the understanding was that there would be a bunch of countries that would then go, and Pakistan would kind of be in the middle of that group. Now, the problem is that none of the countries around, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia in particular, are wanting to commit troops. And I think that makes it very difficult for Pakistan to do the same. So It's there, it's part of the conversation, but a conversation which is not going anywhere because Donald Trump himself doesn't have a clear plan what to do with Gaza.
Absolutely. No, thank you so very much for that analysis. I'm also wondering, though, and perhaps Junaid can answer that question going off of what Dr. Siddiqa just said. Is it possible for Pakistan to send troops without committing to the de-weaponization of Hamas? So have troops there as part of the reconstruction effort, but not the actual de-weaponization. And also, Junaid, Dr. Siddiqa said that Pakistan has no option. We heard similar claims when General Musharraf had joined the US war on terror, the so-called war on terror, that we did not have a choice. And Pakistan did get embroiled in that conflict and paid the price for it when hundreds of thousands of Pakistanis died as a result of that and went missing. So when we say we don't have a choice, and I completely agree with what Dr. Siddiqa is sort of saying here, but what is the price that Pakistanis have to pay when we get embroiled in these international regional conflicts? And then what about popular input in when these foreign policy decisions are being made?
Well, thanks so much, Melka, first of all, for the invitation. Thanks to Community Board for Peace and Justice, Community Alliance for Peace and Justice, and thank you to Code Pink. I'll maybe if I get a chance a little bit later on, I'll speak about how Code Pink, in some ways, really got me involved even while I was sitting in Pakistan. And again, it's also great to be with Dr. Prezada just after a few weeks. And Dr. Siddiqa, after more than a decade, she won't remember this, but in Pakistan, I had hosted her at LUMS. So it's wonderful to be with all of you and to discuss, obviously, this incredibly important issue and issues. As Melika, you know, I have been writing quite a lot since, especially this announcement to join the Board of Peace, but then a follow-up about how there's so much excitement about so-called Islamic NATO, this kind of Sunni axis of resistance. As opposed to kind of the Iran-led axis of resistance that includes Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Pakistan, and so on, versus, as Professor Craig in the UK says, the axis of secessionists, you know, the UAE and Israel and so on. So I kind of link them together because I think it's the same process unfolding, joining the Board of Peace and this so-called Islamic NATO. And I think I'll just offer a few friendly amendments here. As you know, I'm very critical of what's going on, and precisely because one of the reasons you now articulated, and I think that it's the nail on the head. We've had so many regimes making the same argument time and time again, that it is absolutely essential that we join this. We have a say at the table. We have no other option. We'll be bombed to the Stone Age, so on and so on and so forth. And I wrote something on this, which I thought was kind of clever, but it, in some ways, that all of the regimes, all of the military dictatorships in Pakistan have had foreign backing, as we know, and principally from the United States. But I also just thought about it for a second. You know, well, ultimately, Ayub did write friends, not masters. Zia, at the beginning, also said when the U.S. was giving, you know, its aid, Zia called it, "This is peanuts," and asked for more. General Musharraf, you know, the war criminal that he was, as you said, he then said that, what, I had to be threatened to be bombed back to the Stone Age, which was true. I mean, he was not making this up. Versus our current Field Marshal, Chief of Army Staff, who kind of just bends over backwards to anything that is dictated to him by Trump and Washington. You know, you were mentioning how, you know, the both the civilian and the government and the military dictatorship, they'll jump on board anything that Trump says. That's literally true. I mean, it's if he asked them to jump off the moon, they would do it, or jump off of K2, they would do it. I mean, this is both continuity and a significant, I would argue, qualitative change from previous dictators as well. Going back to, I think, what Dr. Pirzada says, we often speak about, you know, who was the worst, who was the most brutal, who was the most vicious. And again, I'm not saying there's the definitive answer to this question, but as we've just now witnessed, and I think I'll definitely address it also when we speak about other issues, especially about Iran, what we've just witnessed this weekend in Balochistan, right? This kind of the mass killing, what someone called the BLA's Tet Offensive, whatever you want to call it, a very kind of unfortunate series of attacks taking place there. And I was just thinking that if you actually ask the Baloch, who's been the worst? I think their probably favorite military dictator was probably Ziaul Haq. The least amount of kind of violence and cruelty, the most kind of accommodating their leaders and the tribals, etc. That happened during Zia. So I'm thinking it's also kind of whose perspective is it when we're speaking about this was the worst, this was the least worst dictator. Same goes in areas like KPK. So I think often it's a very kind of Punjabi, as it is in many things, a Punjabi-centric narrative on these issues. So to come back to what you were saying, Malika, I think that we know how these international institutions and international geopolitics and relations of power operate. But I will just say this, that we hear about how these individual countries, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Indonesia, very different countries, of course. But if you're putting them together, whether you want to call it Islamic NATO or whatever, it becomes quite a powerful bloc. And they're correct about that. When they say we're quite a powerful bloc and consider us like an Islamic NATO, that's fine. But if that's the case, could they not have come together and, first of all, done something during the genocide itself? Could Pakistan even send a single bullet to the people of Gaza? Uh, and now we're such a powerful bloc. Okay, do we really have to roll over? I frankly think if all of them, I mean, this is kind of the dream, but if all of them said that, no, we're not getting on board, this wouldn't go anywhere. Without all of these countries, the financial might in the Gulf, the powerful militaries of Turkey and Pakistan, where do you think this was going to go? Add to that, of course, there are other vassal states, Europeans not going along. So I just think that, there are vassal states and then there are vassal states. And Pakistan right now wants to be at the top of that status, embrace it and celebrate how much of slavish, their relationship with Washington wants to be. So I think that there is power here, but that power is being used to further legitimate empire and whatever Washington and Israel wants to do in the region.
Thank you, Junaid. And I think another of great points and another sort of layer to this is this question of internal legitimacy. And when you have a regime that lacks that, it does look for that external legitimacy that we see a lot of, what's happening in the Pakistan-US sort of relationship at this moment. So, Dr. Siddiq, I'm just going to sort of staying in the region. So apart from the Board of Peace, Pakistan, as you alluded to, is stepping up as a security partner in the Muslim world. It is selling arms to Gulf states, is negotiating fighter jet deals like the JF-17 sales. It has already signed a major mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia. Is this something that Pakistan is choosing to do on its own, or is it being shaped by wider regional pressures, including US priorities?
Well, let me answer this question. See, firstly, what's important to understand is that the current regime wants to build an image of itself, of turning Pakistan into a powerful country which is taken seriously in the region. I mean, from a point 6-7 years ago when Pakistan was nowhere, and the problem is that Pakistan's constant framework, comparative framework, is regional. It's not extra-regional. It looks itself, in the mirror and compares itself with India. So from a point when Quad, was the main focus, and India and the Modi regime was so central to American thinking, to a point when there seems to be kind of a separation between Donald Trump and the Indian government. And that separation, it's important to understand, happened right at the end of the recent India-Pakistan conflict. Now, the recent India-Pakistan conflict is also when India and the United States were about to sign a trade agreement. And then the conflict happened, in which Donald Trump did play a role. Now, Donald Trump played a role because United States is really the only country which can engage both with India and Pakistan. Now, Pakistan then went on a narrative building exercise where it profusely thanked Donald Trump, it recommended his name for Nobel Peace Prize and all of that. Compared to that, Modi was so reluctant and even admitting that Donald Trump played a role, which completely pissed off Donald Trump. And since then, it's about 51 times that on different forums, Donald Trump has mentioned that India lost the war. Now, there were things which Pakistan gained. There were gains that it made militarily, and there were losses, right? It was, an almost war. It was a conflict, 4 days conflict. Now, what Pakistan saw in this recognition from Donald Trump was an image building exercise, which firstly benefited the military. It regained immediately, within days, it regained its image. Junaid is from Lums, and let me share this very, small incident that, I've been talking to students, very progressive students in Lums, and some of them, I talked to them before the conflict, and, they were very critical of the military, and suddenly the same people were like, yeah, it's political engagement bad, but we think that we need a strong military. So the conflict with India had changed that perspective. Stepping on, Pakistan then built itself it built its image further and tried to build a role for itself further on the shoulders of Trump's accolades. And it saw itself developing a role for itself in the region. Also because it saw where the gaps were in Trump's thinking or Trump's overall plans. Firstly, one of the things which one keeps hearing is that Donald Trump has America has 8 to 9 bases in the Middle East, and it wants to reduce the size of its engagement, of its manpower, and bring in other militaries there. And, from the conflict with India, what has really worked for the Pakistani military is an image where it is seen as a military which can actually fill in those shoes and work hand in hand with the American forces there. That's one. Secondly, it started building this narrative of a NATO, an Islamic NATO, and all of that. Now, there are holes in that argument itself, because we keep hearing that there's Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. It ain't happening. Partly because Saudi Arabia doesn't want it. Saudi Arabia does not trust Turkey. Saudi Arabia, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman has not forgiven either Imran Khan or Turkey, because when Imran Khan's government was there, and there was a point when Turkey called a conference of Muslim countries, and Imran Khan wanted to go, and then he said, sorry, but I've been stopped by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia doesn't want a challenge. So I don't see it getting together with Turkey because it doesn't trust Turkey, where Turkey would actually build its own image on the basis of that. So that's one. Secondly, yes, it has signed an agreement, a strategic agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is different from the agreement it has signed in the past. I'm saying it on the basis of talking to people who've actually seen the document. Sadly enough, the document has not been shared by the with the Pakistani parliament. It's not been discussed. It's a political decision, not
Sure.
shared with its parliamentarians. Now, what it says is it uses the word mutual for the first time and aggression. And what is Saudi Arabia's main concern is, of course, Saudi Arabia, the threat doesn't really emanate from Israel to Saudi Arabia. But in case, because of Israeli action in the Middle East, and I'm talking about an attack on Iran, for instance, a repeat of the attack on Iran, there's going to be a major chaos. Now, in case of a major chaos, Saudi Arabia needs protection. The royal family needs protection. There is Yemen. There'll be more chaos. There's a Shia-Sunni conflict, a wider Shia-Sunni conflict which will emerge from it. And it needs protection, and therefore, Pakistan, it sees that role for Pakistan. Now, part of the agreement was also that Saudi Arabia is going to help Pakistan build its economy.
Right.
Now, very final point here. See, Pakistan's main focus, this regime's main focus is investing in any idea which brings money to Pakistan, definitely to the military. But that, unfortunately, is not even happening. None of the countries who seem to be egging Pakistan on playing a role are actually giving it any money. There's no cash there.
Right.
Saudi Arabia has not invested. UAE is not invested. Nobody's invested. And sorry, one very final point. This whole claim about selling so many weapons, wonderful idea. I mean, firstly, it's a bit laughable that the planes that were used during the Pakistan-India conflict were the J-10Cs provided by China. It's completely Chinese. They've not given Pakistan the technology, sold Pakistan the J-10Cs. It's not given it, transfer the technology or even part of it. But what Pakistan is then saying is that JF-17 Thunder, which Pakistan has co-developed with China, and the Pakistan Air Force has a major role in, firming up the design of the aircraft. But the problem is that it has limited capacity, 12 to 15 aircraft. So if you're telling the world that you're going to produce 76 to 96 aircraft in 3 years, then where is the capacity and where is the money to actually be able to produce? So what we hear is we hear about these MOUs, these interests expressed by these countries from Libya to Bangladesh to others, but the only confirmed order so far is with Azerbaijan of a year and a half ago, out of which I think 5 or 7 aircraft have been delivered to them. Libya, the agreement, but just finishing, the agreement with Libya, on the other hand, it's UAE. It was done with the help of UAE. Now, UAE and Saudi Arabia itself have a conflict.
Right,
so
in Libya
in the middle of a factionalized Middle East, I don't know where Pakistan is going to draw, what benefits it's going to draw from it.
Thank you. That's an incredible analysis.
Mehalka,
Mohit, please respond to... Yes.
I need a few minutes to clarify my own thinking on some of the points. One very troubling aspect of the whole discussion, this discussion, and every discussion that happens in the context of Pakistan is when we use the word comprehensive word and term Pakistan, what Pakistan really means. For all practical purposes, when anyone refers to in any think tank discussion, any academic discussion, any media discussion, what is referred to as Pakistan is actually Pakistani military. There is no real existence in the discourse of any Pakistan other than the interests of the Pakistani military. Now, had this been the only problem, had Pakistani military been really the kind of institution which American and British think tanks and academics have always referred to, it would have still been fine that you think that there is an institutional thought, there is a thinking. What we have seen and increasingly understood is the Pakistani military, what is referred to as Pakistan, is equal to Pakistani military. What is Pakistani military? Is the sum total interest of the man who controls the military machine, and that is the army chief. Now, in every single case, In 1965, maybe it was General Ayub whose interests were in the 1965 war. Then it was General Zia. Once again, throughout this existence, there was a question of legitimacy of the regime. I do not remember if any Pakistani regime ever was sovereign or ever was legitimate and had internal legitimacy. All Pakistani regimes which have engaged in external conflicts had serious issues and questions of legitimacy hanging upon them. So in general, Zia-ul Haq was an extremely unpopular character who hanged a twice popularly elected Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1979. And when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan happened, General Zia got a new lease of life by siding with the Western alliance, which was United States. Money was coming from Saudi Arabia, and the whole Western world, Pakistan became the darling, the frontline state against the Soviet thing. And every important decision maker in the Western world that mattered was coming to Pakistan and appreciating the Pakistani efforts. So that was a lease of life. Similarly, General Musharraf was extremely unpopular. He was not as unpopular as General Zia, but yet General Musharraf was very isolated. No one was really talking to him. Then 9/11 happened. He didn't have any contacts, apart from the fact that he was very lucky to manage a trip to Agra in India. He was sidelined. He had no real interaction with anyone. And then suddenly the 9/11 happened. He was invited to Camp David. He became the darling. He was addressing the European and the British Parliament. He was being received everywhere in the world. So the question of legitimacy has always been very central. Now, the present incumbent was a retired army officer on 27th or 28th of November 2022 when he was made the army chief. The question of legitimacy hanged around him, and the way he has changed the whole Pakistani structure. He has demolished the courts, he has changed the military structure, he has demolished the largest political party, he has finished off all conventions of media. So in between comes up the opportunity of the peace ports. And by and large, despite all what he did, and despite the fact that he had the support of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the UK aid, the GSP Plus, which Pakistan probably didn't deserve to continue because of the conditionalities that are attached with the GSP Plus, everything was going on, yet the regime had the perception of not really being welcome. They were not really, really part of some sort of grand table. This war with India and the presence of Donald Trump and Donald Trump's peculiar psychological requirements in terms of appreciation, the Nobel Peace Prize, that he should be appreciated, that he has saved millions of people from a definitive nuclear cataclysm, that has all really played in the hands of the regime, of which the most important character or the decision maker is General Asim Munir. So when we refer to the word Pakistan, and inevitably you can't really blame anyone, any of us, for using the word Pakistan. We can't really carry on a linguistic discourse, a communication without referring to the word Pakistan. What we are seeing is not Pakistan. What we have to see are the interests, a very small group of men, that is General Asim Munir, and a few small, powerful group of small decision makers which are clustered around General Asim Munir. This is not Pakistan. This is military, and this is General Asim Munir.
I think that's a very important distinction that you made. Thank you so much for doing that, Mueed. But my question to you now is really about tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan, right? You're talking about the interests of the Pakistani military and then the man at the top. There have been rising tensions between the two countries because of a sharp escalation in militant attacks inside Pakistan that Pakistani authorities blame on the Pakistani Taliban, a militant group that is present in Pakistan, but is also operating from Afghanistan. And some people argue that this growing instability is being used to once again present Pakistan as an essential security partner for the US. How would you respond to that? And do you think Pakistan is going to play any role in helping the US reclaim the Bagram airbase in Afghanistan? And this is something that Trump has openly said he wants the US to regain access of.
So, Mahalka, there are a number of questions in your question. You and my participants might have seen a leaked document on the Twitter a few weeks ago, probably 2 weeks ago, in which a former US ambassador, Paul Jones, who now serves for a lobbyist that has been hired by the Pakistani government with the Pakistani military, had written an email to Elizabeth Horst, who was the former Department of State and Biden administration official, in which they had attached a document which was actually a proposal from the lobbyist. And the Paul Jones requests Elizabeth Horst to review the document and tell us if anything more can be added. So the document actually talks of the need for a renewed, new, restructured relationship between Pakistan and United States. Whereas it talks of other things, there was one thing which people noticed with a lot of keen interest and highlighted was a Pakistani potential proposal that Pakistan can actually help United States go into Afghanistan and retrieve the large, heavy American weapons which the US forces left behind in Afghanistan in August 2021 when they withdrew from there. Now, this is a very interesting thing. The way the argument was structured was this, that these weapons are being used by the ISAF against Pakistan, to which there is very limited evidence to basically support that ISAF is using the American weapons principally against Pakistan. But the proposal actually means that the Pakistani regime is prepared. If United States is prepared to fund this kind of effort and initiative, if United States really comes behind Pakistan, Pakistan is ready to go inside Afghanistan and can retrieve the weapon. That means Pakistan is ready to attack Afghanistan. That means Pakistan is ready to engage in a larger war effort with Afghanistan. Now, coming back to the previous question that, the Pakistan complains, of course, Pakistan is building up a case that all its problems in the erstwhile FATA, in the TTP, are because of the support of the Afghan Taliban. Well, there might be certain elements of truth in it, but the Pakistani problems in FATA starting from 2002, 3, 4, and when Pakistan started formal military operations in 2024, and since now, this is the 23rd large-scale military operation, which according to the DGISPR has thousands of intelligence-based operations. For instance, when they gave the summary in January 2026, they said that last year they were carried more than 75,000 or 80,000 intelligence-based operations within the framework of what is referred to as the 23rd grand operation in the erstwhile FATA. The first one probably started in 2024. So if you look in the space of 20 plus years, if Pakistan is carrying the 23rd operation against the erstwhile FATA, the Afghan Taliban are nowhere supporting the FATA insurgency in 2004 or 5 or 6 or 7 and onwards. In fact, since I was present in Pakistan in all this time period, I was attending all the briefings which the Pakistani military gave at the highest possible level or at the regional or local level. The Pakistani military never blamed Afghan Taliban. They blamed United States, they blamed India, they blamed United States and India for supporting the TTP in the Pakistani areas. This was normal. I mean,
and they couldn't have blamed the Afghan Taliban. They were sitting right there in Pakistan itself. Pakistan was giving sanctuary to the Afghan Taliban leadership at the time.
So look at the ridiculous situation. The Afghan Taliban leadership was sitting in Islamabad, was sitting in Quetta, was sitting in Peshawar. The Americans were breathing on to get them out, to arrest them. Since we always believed, nationalism is a huge problem, so we believed the Pakistani military's briefing. On several occasions, I placed the Pakistani military's perspective with the top American diplomats, ambassadors, deputy chief of the mission, the other people. I said that, look, we have reason to believe this thing, that Americans are supporting the TTP. You're playing a double game. You're also attacking them. And they would look surprised. They said, look, we are using, give us this ridiculous situation that we have created TTP. We are supporting TTP and we are attacking them and killing them with the help of the drone strikes. How many TTP leadership have you killed? So similarly, yes, the Afghan Taliban might be sympathetic to the TTP. There are cultural, ethnic, religious kind of tribal linkages between them. But to basically make the argument that the TTP derives all its support from the Afghan Taliban is a very bogus argument. Once again, this, as you suggested in your question, is a Pakistani military's attempt to create something, some sort of initiative in the region in which they can get same kind of leverage, same kind of support from the United States, which they probably had in 1980s during the Soviet invasion and subsequently after 9/11. So far, it hasn't really happened. And when you come back to the Paul Jones memo, which he sends to the Elizabeth Horst from the lobbyist, you basically see that the complete grand design is exposed in front of you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for this very important point, Smith. Junaid, let me turn to you to another another huge regional flashpoint, right? So tensions between the US and Iran are once again coming to a head, most probably supported by Israel. If this escalates, where does Pakistan fit in? And can Pakistan really stay neutral in this? Will it be forced to pick a side, do you think? And if it has to pick a side, especially if it gets involved because of US urging, what kind of role do you think it would be expected to play? Would it be providing logistics, bases, airspace support? What do you think is possible?
Right. Well, yeah, obviously, this has been the big news for the past few weeks, in addition, of course, to the Board of Peace, Islamic NATO, and you know, at some point, it seems inevitable, imminent war on Iran based on the huge armada that's obviously been amassed there. And so I think we have to then go back to, because we should see all of this as an extension of the 12-day war between Israel and Iran in June of 2025. And during that war between the two countries, Pakistan had issued statements saying, well, even before it, I mean, it didn't really do anything during it either, but it said that, look, we're on your side if you need us for anything. And so these nice kind of public statements, obviously, without actually doing anything. And so I think that, Pakistan, in some ways, it's very tied to the decision making going on, obviously, by the Saudis and the Qataris and others. So it's following that lead, as long as it doesn't kind of really anger Trump. Takes its regional directions from these Gulf countries. And this is where obviously what we're seeing is very different from the way Saudi Arabia used to treat any issue going on with Iran. It would be just as gun ho, if not more so, than Israel in wanting to undermine, attack Iran. Things are different now. And one of the main thing that's completely changed these regional calculations is the rogue nature of Israel, right? I mean, it's just gone beyond anything imaginable. Obviously, with the genocide in Gaza, but beyond that, bombing now 7 countries during the entire episode of the genocide outside of Palestine, including in Qatar. So, if Qatar can see that the Israelis can bomb them, and they have this huge American base that they're hosting, and their defenses do not do anything to protect it. That is the regional calculation now. It's not any great new love lost with Iran. It is just from their own geostrategic calculations that we have to be on guard on what Israel is doing. And Dr. Siddiqa is absolutely right. The unexpected rapprochement between Saudis and Turkey really has to do with this simple fact: that all of these countries feel like they're threatened by this rogue Israel that no one can control, not even Washington can control Israel. And so these kind of pacts of convenience taking place, they will continue as long as we have this rogue state of Israel in the region. And so, coming back to Iran, I mean, it's difficult to imagine that Iran won't be attacked at this stage. The Israelis obviously have wanted it since 20 years ago, but the amount of armada that the Americans have amassed there, it's like in Venezuela. You don't take all of that, the naval forces of the U.S. to do nothing. Ultimately, they had to do something, and they took out Maduro. So I really do expect that. And of course, this is going to be, I mean, catastrophic from any serious observer looking at this. It's going to be catastrophic. In terms of what would be expected from Pakistan, again, I think that itself, the United States and Iran, they have become such rogue elements in world order. I think that you don't really need Pakistan in that sense to be directly involved. Maybe if it's a prolonged war, which it could be, prolonged war, then countries will be forced to take sides. But right now, I think it's very important to understand what they fear, what they used to fear, the Saudis and the other Sunni sectarians. The Iran issue, that's on the back burner right now. Right now, it's very understandable that they, like most of the world, fear this rogue regime in Tel Aviv.
Sure, Junaid, thank you so much. Yes, Dr. Siddiqa, you wanted to respond.
Just very quickly.
Of course.
See, I see Junaid's argument, but here is where slight disagreement. I think it's important to understand that the entire region, which includes Saudi Arabia, I mean, don't make it right now into a Sunni versus Shia. In the entire Middle East is very shaken by the thought of another attack on Iran. What would it then mean? See, because it's important to understand that Israel, when it thinks of attack on Iran, is not looking at regime change. It's looking at Iran's collapse, just like what happened in Syria, just what happened in Libya, what happened in Iraq. And Iran's collapse, on the other hand, is going to will have such negatively phenomenal results for the entire region. I mean, I hope people understand that after Iran, the largest Shia population is in Pakistan itself. More numbers than even in Iraq.
Right.
Saudi Arabia, all the oil provinces where oil is drilled out in Saudi Arabia, you have Shia population. Bahrain has Shia population. Qatar has Shia population. So the effect is not going to be small. And I think this is the argument which each of them are making with Donald Trump, which is what making him stop and getting him to, talk to Iran. Because the chaos will be so unmanageable that America will get sucked into a region and wouldn't know how to extract itself.
Absolutely.
So I think very quickly, I think the important fact is that it's more than just fear of Israel. It's the fear of the chaos which it will generate. And so even United Arab Emirates, which has links with Israel, it has said to the United States that it's not going to offer any base.
That's true, Dr. Siddiqa. Both the Saudis and the UAE have been, they made those claims, we will not provide any support. And then you had MBS come out and say, like, there was, he said to everybody in Washington that, yes, there will be, a fallout in the region. But if you don't go in right now into Iran, this regime is going to stay. And so you had these public statements, but then you don't really know what's going on in.
So let me quickly add one thing. So the Axios, the US publication, which is an insider in Washington, said that when Khalid bin Salman was here on Thursday, Friday, in meetings, he basically said that if the Trump administration didn't strike in Iran, then the regime would be emboldened. So something has to be done. Now, MBS is saying one thing while he talks with Masoud Pezeshkian, the Iran's president. So there is a different rhetoric, and it was a different position was being taken inside Washington. And just in the last 48 hours, Saudi Arabia signed a contract of $9 billion of these, Patriot missiles, which were for stopping the incoming missiles. And Israel got $3.4 billion. So you don't really know what the real position is.
And I completely agree with Dr. Siddiqa that the chaos that will ensue is going to be catastrophic for the region. And Dr. Siddiqa, just if you could talk really briefly about, and I had another question for you, but just briefly about what we saw in Balochistan yesterday, right? Balochistan borders, for our audience members who don't know, Iran and Afghanistan. And there was a massive attack by a militant group, the Baloch Liberation Army, attacked military installations across the province. And there was a lot of, a huge security situation that emerged. If there is an attack on Iran, what is that going to do? How is that going to affect Pakistan and also Balochistan, where there's so much unrest anyway?
Interesting.
Very quickly, I think it's important to understand for your audience. It's important to explain to them that there are two different kind of movements. There is Balochistan, Iranian Balochistan, and there is Pakistani Balochistan.
Right.
Now, in Pakistani Balochistan, the movement is ethnic. Majority want to now separate from Pakistan. It's an ethnic issue. On the other hand, the movement in Iranian Balochistan is for autonomy, and it's a Sunni Deobandi movement. Two separate. They may not necessarily be sympathetic to each other,
Right, right.
primarily because the Iranian regime has been helping and providing safe haven to insurgents from Pakistani Balochistan. So to argue that, some people like Mushahid Hussain Sayyed, a senior politician, has been arguing that, he sees this uh, Israeli hand in whatever is happening in Balochistan. Now, I think what's happened in Balochistan, important to point out, is a complete intelligence failure. This is really the result of a very arrogant military which doesn't believe or look at political dialogue of any kind. On the one hand, it's that, and the other, it's inability to provide, good intelligence. Thirdly, it's about how people are getting desperate in Balochistan and increasingly thinking of joining militancy.
Right.
What's the most significant development of this, very recent attack is not that women were suicide bombers. There were women who were engaged in fighting as well. And it's, the government's argument is, oh, it's not a huge numbers. It's not about how many fighters. It's how little it takes to fail the security apparatus. Even how little does it take to fail the security apparatus, number one. And number two, when you have sympathy, there are videos that you can see where in Quetta is very central. Quetta is where you have a core command, Quetta core command, right? They had to seal off the Quetta cantonment in order to protect it. And while militants were insurgents were roaming around and people were welcoming them.
Right.
So there is sympathy in the population. It's the story of varied development. It's the story of a state ignoring a major part of the country. And sadly, not that I see Pakistan breaking away, not that I see Balochistan separating, but this is going to be a very desperate and unfortunate and ugly situation, which is going to continue. And the state will constantly be, its main narrative will be, we are being attacked from outside, and therefore,
Absolutely. Just this utter failure to address the legitimate grievances of the Baloch people, even those who have been waging this movement very peacefully, like Dr. Mahrang Baloch and others, and their failure, the military's failure to even engage with them. In fact, she is now incarcerated. Human rights lawyers like Iman Mazari, who've spoken out on behalf of her, is now incarcerated. So, I think this shows failure at so many different levels.
Melika, just one very quick point. I think then they're going to use the insurgency in Balochistan as part of their narrative, not just to control Balochistan, but to control rest of Pakistan as well.
Right, absolutely.
That's the tragic part. They'll say, oh, there is so much threat, so we have to be firm. We have to control.
And crack down even further. With Balochistan, what's happening there, with what's happening in KPK, with the military operations and the TTP. So absolutely, this is just going to result in greater repression, unfortunately. Dr. Siddiqa, the question that I did have for you, if you could be very brief, because I want to get to Mueed and Junaid, and I don't know how much time we'll have for audience Q&A, but is about how India and China, Pakistan's two very powerful neighbors, how are they viewing Pakistan's evolving and very close relationship with the Trump administration at this point? Do they see Pakistan as a proxy for outside interests, as a stabilizing force, serving American? How do they see this situation or this relationship?
As brief as I can get. The problem is that in India, there is an equal amount of stupidity there. And the problem is, but the way India is watching what's happening is, all right, what we're looking at is another 3 years of Trump. So this is going to be painful, but let's wait for another 3 years.
Okay.
Meanwhile, it's engaging with China. It's engaging with all other countries to look at. I mean, India has been very careful in not joining the Board of Peace.
Peace. Right.
It got an invitation, but hasn't joined.
Right.
It's being careful and it's keeping, a safe distance. It's even in conversation with China because right now, a lot of countries, including Europe, are thinking about what this man is bringing to our table without us wanting it,
Right.
right? So from Greenland to Iran to this and that, plans for Gaza, Rivera. So what China is doing is, giving a large space to Pakistan.
Mm.
China doesn't like what's happening. What it keeps reminding Pakistani government, Pakistani visitors that look, we want protection of our workers in Pakistan.
Right.
And the Pakistani government has failed to do anything on that. It has even offered earlier that, to deploy its own military, private security in Pakistan, especially around projects where Chinese are working, which Pakistan has denied, partly because it understands that there's going to be an increase in attacks and, which will make things more ugly and difficult. So that's one. But what China is doing is China understands that way Pakistan is going to please United States. Pakistan, for example, has said there are a number of places where in Balochistan where China has expressed its interest. Right? There's rare earth minerals, there's copper. Pakistan says, we gave you what we thought we could give you. We're a sovereign state, therefore we can get anybody else to come.
Mm.
It also understands that Pakistan, 72 to 80% of Pakistan's weapons today come from China.
Right.
China is the main source of security. So Pakistan ain't going anywhere from China. It can turn away, but at the end of the day, it will be more dependent because China also understands that Washington's interest in Pakistan is very transactional.
Sure.
And it's going to be short term, short to medium term. There'll be an interest and then poof, it'll be gone. But China is regional. China
Right.
is next door and it has a greater role to play. But what it's decided is not give Pakistan the cash that the generals want.
Mm.
It is the relationship has also turned partly strategic, but partly transactional.
Mm. Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just going to move on because we do have to get to the other questions really quickly. Muid, and you might have touched on this before, but again, talking about this internal legitimacy thing, right? Many of these major regional decisions that the Pakistani government has made are deeply unpopular inside Pakistan. And widely questioned after a massively rigged election that we saw 2 years ago. So what does this do to Pakistan's regional and international standing when the regime itself lacks public trust at home? How enduring are these foreign policy decisions?
So if I correctly understand that, the Pakistan. So Mehelka, you start looking at all Pakistani regimes starting from 1958. I wonder, apart from the 5-year term of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's government, was there any Pakistani regime that had internal sovereignty, legitimacy, or there was in fact an assertive, in command prime minister? That's the only time period that I think that Pakistan had a civilian prime minister, whether he was good or bad, whether he made good decisions or bad decisions. He was a sort of a sovereign, independent prime minister. So all Pakistani regimes since the end of the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto government and even before them, were looking for legitimacy to the outside support, So the Pakistani regimes look to how the West thinks about them, what the Western media writes about them, what the Western government basically says about them. So from that point of view, it is not very different. However, this time they have a very difficult situation. Not only that they have two raging insurgencies, which Dr. Aisha Siddiqa brilliantly explained, the consequences in Balochistan and the erstwhile FATA, but they also have mainstream political party like Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and Imran Khan challenging them continuously, not really going away in the largest province of Punjab and also in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So this is an extremely unpopular regime. Yet you have to appreciate the fact that they have been able to leverage themselves so effectively outside. The more resistance they have internally, the more leverage they basically draw from the outside. So many things, Mahalka, you have been activist in raising the issues of democracy and human rights and rule of law from within United States for the past 3 years, and you've seen the more pressure the Pakistani American communities have raised at the Hill, with the Congress, with the Senate, the more the Pakistani government has actually done something to basically please the United States, So they continuously leverage outside, joining the peace of boards, probably sending the troops, which they don't want to send the troops. I fully agree with Dr. Aisha Siddiqa. They don't want to send the troops to the International Stabilization Force. None of the Muslim countries wants to send. But they have leverage and positioned themselves in such a way that they extract more and more legitimacy from the Western support system.
Sure. Thank you so much, Moeed. And you mentioned Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and then also I feel like during Imran Khan's time, when he did try and assert a more independent foreign policy, which he did in certain cases around Ukraine and and Afghanistan and all of those things, I think there was a massive push to see him out because that is something that is not tolerated, right? By
Also the Turkey Malaysia Muslim
the
bloc.
Turkey, Malaysia, I think that absolutely that Dr. Siddiqa had mentioned as well. So and we've also known what former Prime Minister Imran Khan's stance has been around Palestine. So had he been in power, we probably would not have gone in that direction either. So Junaid, let me ask you the last question. For audiences in North America, this entire crisis, everything we've been talking about, is thousands of miles away. This might seem like someone else's crisis, but as we know, US policies are deeply intertwined with what's happening in Pakistan today. Why should people here in North America, why should they care? Not just as a matter of strategy or security, but in terms of democratic values, accountability, and the real human costs of these choices.
Right, Malcolm. Well, obviously, this has been an old story. I think it's entered one of its worst phases right now in terms of the way the U.S. government is supporting dictatorship in Pakistan. First and foremost, that's beyond the general humanitarian impulse to address these issues anywhere in the world. First of all, if you're living in the United States as a citizen or not as a citizen, that is your principal objective, what your government is doing internally or abroad. And in this situation, we know that. It's a Biden-sponsored regime change coup against Khan in April 2022, and it continues. All of the Pakistani Americans that thought Trump and Khan were good friends and Trump would remember his good friend, all of that collapsed instantly, and they knew that whatever they were told privately was a fraud. And perhaps they should have known that, but and so you've seen just the escalation of that relationship. And you're also dealing with a character like Trump. It's not like Trump cares about these issues anywhere. This is what we say is often the refreshing part about this horrible regime, the Trump regime, is that in the past, presidents at least paid lip service to we're going there for democracy, freedom, human rights. He just went to Venezuela and he can't rid himself from the word oil, oil, oil. Okay, can you make it any clearer? George Bush was a war criminal, but I don't think he said we're going in Iraq for their oil. It's all about, democracy and freedom. So this is the other problem we confront right now. We're also dealing with a U.S. government which doesn't even make pretense to these issues anymore, which makes it even more imperative that civil society to civil society, people to people, and I go back, and it's a good way that I can at least give credit to CODEPINK and my own kind of activism. So I was based in Pakistan, I was based in Lums, and I remember sure Code Pink remembers, when they came in 2012 in solidarity with the anti-drone campaign led by Imran Khan, and we had done some work on campus. We had hosted them. And in fact, it was through that, because I already knew folks in Code Pink, especially Medea Benjamin, and we had hosted them. It was actually through that I actually then engaged Imran Khan. Students were like, oh, yeah, students were like, well, sir, he's saying the same things. I was like, I highly doubt it. I'm pretty revolutionary. I don't think it. But that's when I actually first started to engage Khan. And that's where kind of our relationship, with a lot of respectful disagreements, emerged from then. But I think that's the type of engagement. It's not engagement when Trump is calling you his favorite field marshal. That's not engagement. It's not engagement when Shehbaz Sharif goes in Sharm el Sheikh and just fawns and over Trump. I mean, this is not engagement. Engagement is that people-to-people grassroots mobilization around all these issues. The same way we have been mobilizing around Gaza, and now against war in Iran. I mean, Pakistan, what's going on in Pakistan is an extension of that. And just coming back to this whole question of Zionism and Israel and so on, we often are hung up on that word of kind of normalization, or I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's actually quite I mean, it would be quite foolish to say next day, oh yeah, we're normalizing, we're joining the Abraham Accords. Usually these things, it's done through discretion. So even though I do think that there are a lot of impulses right now that are, that in the past they weren't as present there, in terms of, oh, Saudi soon getting on board the Abraham Accords, etc. Right now, there's that enthusiasm has gone for just very understandable reasons. We also have to be very, very vigilant about how kind of what I call the kind of the overt Zionism of a country like the UAE, etc., versus the kind of the more covert, surreptitious Zionism, or at least facilitation of Zionist hegemony by countries like the Saudis and, of course, like the Pakistan. I think that's where the vigilance should remain, but the focus should be on that grassroots, people-to-people interaction. Dr. Perzada is absolutely right. I mean, whenever we speak about it, it's about, yeah, we're talking about the Pakistani military, but I would add, to that, is all of the enablers, right? Whether it's the civilian politicians, but even more so for our purposes, an entire crop of intelligentsia, right? That facilitates this. And in this, the post regime change 2020, you have seen this most tragically, right? Like, I mean, I say that Pakistan is easily the largest Muslim country, the Muslim country that has the largest English-speaking intelligentsia. Where have they been? If they spoke more, New York Times would be on this, everyone. But New York Times is really interesting. And I think it represents the kind of the conundrum during this period. And that is, New York Times knows how unpopular that regime is, and knows what the Pakistani American sentiment is. So it's not going to praise it, but it's not going to criticize it either. That's kind of, I'm sure Dr. Prasad, that's how it's floated these past couple of years. Don't touch it, right? Don't touch it. And that has led the way. So I think that we have to kind of continue that. And I think we have to learn from our mistakes as well, in terms of Pakistani American, what has worked, what has not worked. Only the lobbying of Congress, very important, but how do we actually engage in popular education on this thing? The exact thing that allowed Trump to get away with, basically privately, his officials telling Pakistani American community, hey, don't worry, when we come, we're going to free Imran Khan. We cannot do that model anymore. This has to be public. It has to be popular education rather than kind of whispers here and there. So I think that's the way forward.
Thank you, Junaid. That's really incredibly helpful, and which is why we're so grateful to Code Pink for taking this initiative to sort of send this message to the larger American public so that they can be effective allies for us as well. Danica, so sorry this went on. We really didn't leave a lot
on and on, on and on and on and
on. You know what? That's okay. I think all of our guests today really, I think answered most of the questions that were coming up from the audience within your answers. So really grateful for all of you for covering so much ground in such a short period of time. You've really done amazing work and provided a lot of context for everyone in the audience. So I appreciate you all. And thank you to everyone who tuned in on a Sunday for this webinar, U.S.-Pakistan relationship and its impact on the region. Thank you to our guests, Dr. Moeed Pirzada, Junaid Ahmed, and Aisha Siddiqa. You all really covered so much in such a short amount of time. So very, very grateful again. And you've illustrated how timely this series has become, especially with the US gearing up to attack Iran. So it's really important that everyone understands the US-Pakistan relationship, especially right now. And thank you to Mahalka Samdani for facilitating both of these critical conversations, and to the entirety of the Community Alliance for Peace and Justice for co-leading the series with us. And please follow CODEPINK and the Community Alliance for Peace and Justice to stay updated on these issues. And if you've RSVP'd to this program, you could look forward to a follow-up email from us with additional resources. And please stay in touch with us and stay active, because this is as important as ever. So I hope you have a great day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. It was
Thank you to
wonderful.
our
Thank you so
excellent
much.
Very
speakers.
good discussion. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.